Hi all, today I'm talking about The Case for Animal Rights by Tom Regan. So his argument will go something like this. Normal, mature mammals are sentient and they have a host of psychological abilities, including memory, the ability to project into the future, etc. And since they have those psychological abilities, they are also what he's going to call subjects of a life. Subjects of a life meaning things can go better or worse for them, just in the same sort of way that things can go better or worse for human beings. Premise 2, subjects of a life have inherent value. Inherent value, as we'll see, is a concept that Regan sort of invents to get around some of the problems of utilitarianism and to ground the idea that all human beings have rights, and then that will extend into the animal kingdom as well. So subjects of life have inherent value. Inherent value does not come in degrees. It's an on-off feature. So if you have those psychological abilities, then you meet the minimum threshold to have inherent value. And if you have it just as much as anybody else. So any animal that has inherent value has just as much inherent value as anybody else. And we must respect and avoid intentionally harming beings with inherent value. Therefore, we must respect and avoid intentionally harming animals. There'll also be a host of other things we must avoid doing with animals, including exploiting them for all sorts of purposes that we normally do. So let's look into how he's going to support the premises here, how he's going to build this argument. So he starts by talking about indirect duty views. So moral views that say that we have obligations not to animals, but regarding animals. So we have obligations to people, really, but not to animals directly, though sometimes we have to treat animals well because of our duties to our fellow human beings. So the indirect duty views are going to be contractarianism and Kantian deontology. In these moral systems, we have no direct obligations to non-human animals, but since some people covered by the social contract sympathize with some animals, or because some rational autonomous beings own pets, we must treat those animals well. So it's sort of like those beings that do matter have property rights over these pets, so we have indirect duties to those. Now that sounds pretty good. It sounds good because we would get, most human beings we'd have obligations to them, and many, but not all, non-human animals. So as far as our common sense view towards non-human animals, it seems to be that we have moral obligations to some, but not all non-human animals. And that view seems pretty intuitive, so Regan wants to say these views, contractarianism or Kantian deontology, would be acceptable if either theory offered an adequate view for the moral status of just human beings, but they don't. They either leave out the powerless and those without a sense of justice and justify their marginalization in the case of contractarianism, or leave out those who are not rational and autonomous and justify their exploitation. We've talked about that at length in previous classes, so Regan's just laying the groundwork for surveying the field here with regard to views that he finds unacceptable before he's going to lay on to us his view that he does think is acceptable. So then there are views that say we have direct obligations to non-human animals. The first amongst those that he's going to talk about is the cruelty kindness view. On that view, we have a direct obligation to non-human animals to be kind, and a direct obligation to avoid being cruel to them, and that we wrong them, not somebody else, when we treat them in this, if we are not kind to them and if we are cruel to them. Now, the problem with this view is, again, we see with human beings, it runs into problems very obviously. Kindness can be a vice if it's misdirected. So if you are overly kind to a horrible monster of a person, then your kindness would be misapplied and would actually be a vice. And the absence of cruelty is not sufficient for morally good behavior. Think of cases where you might be a remote cause of something bad happening, like somebody makes it their life quest to buy all and only clothes that were made in sweatshops. Even though they're not directly being cruel to people who are making those clothes, that is unsavory. So this cruelty kindness view is not going to be sufficient for our moral obligations, again, towards human beings, certainly not towards animals either. I mean, imagine you paid somebody to torture an animal. You wouldn't be being cruel to the animal, but it still seems like it's morally unacceptable. So the next view, which I think he would categorize as a direct view that he wants to cover, is utilitarianism. So he wants to call out that utilitarianism has a lot going for it that the other theories don't. So the principles of utility and equality, so utility that we need to maximize well-being, and equality that everybody's happiness and well-being counts equally in our equation, that leads to a view that is uncompromisingly egalitarian. So one in which everybody counts for one and only one, and not just human beings, but any sentient creature goes into the calculus equally, and their interests count equally. So that allows utilitarianism to avoid some of the problems that plague contractarianism and Kantian deontology when it comes to the scope of the moral community. All human beings on this view get into the moral community. And it also extends well into the animal kingdom. So it's got a lot going for it. However, Regan wants to point out that there are some problems. It's not sufficient to ground human or non-human animal rights. We talked about this. I mean, this is nothing new here. Regan's just surveying the field. Utilitarianism seems to be incompatible with our feeling that people deserve rights that can't be tread on in order to maximize utility. So he spells this out in a really nice way. Utilitarians don't really care about individuals so much as they care about maximizing a feeling that individuals have. But if trampling a being is a way to maximizing well-being, then that trampling that being is justified. He makes a nice analogy of cups filled with fluids. So it's not that what utilitarianism is trying to do is something like what somebody might be trying to do if they were trying to maximize the amount of water in a set of cups. The utilitarians don't care about the cups themselves. They're just containers that hold, in this case, water is the analogy for happiness. And if breaking a cup was necessary to maximize the level of water in the cups, then a utilitarian would say, go for it. So the individuals are not valuable in themselves. It's just that they are containers for a feeling that we're trying to maximize in the world. Gives another example of a mean old aunt that has a lot of money. If she was a grouchy old lady that nobody really liked, and a utilitarian thought, well, I can get away with killing her, and then I'll inherit the money, and then I can donate it to these good causes, and suffering will be alleviated, and that will maximize well-being in the world, then utilitarianism would recommend that. So all this is to say, he sums it up nicely by saying utilitarianism is an aggregative theory. So it's about aggregating the amount of happiness. It's not about protecting individuals, right? And Regan thinks that utilitarianism is deficient in that way. All right, so what is his rights view? He's going to try to fix that problem with utilitarianism by introducing an idea that he calls inherent value. So he posits that all human beings have inherent value, and any being with inherent value has rights. So that would protect all human beings from exploitation and discrimination, etc. So a problem with utilitarianism is that it's not in principle against exploitation or discrimination, even it's not in principle against even slavery. And Regan wants to say utilitarianism is defective in that way. So he's going to say all human beings have something called inherent value, and that's what gives them rights. That's what allows them, makes it so that it's never okay to use them as mere means. I mean, he's really following Kant along these lines. We'll just see the difference between his theory and Kant's theory is what qualities allow beings to have this sort of, in Kant's words, dignity, in Regan's words, inherent value. So, attempts to limit rights to all and only human beings fall flat because about the only quality that all humans share is being what Regan calls the experiencing subjects of lives. So by that he means we are beings such that things can go better or worse for us, such that we prefer the way we have preferences, right? We have things that we want to avoid, things that we want to go towards that would make our life worse or better. And clearly, many animals share that quality. So they have experiences such that we could say that that dog is having a bad day, that dog is having a good day, right? Things could go worse or better for it. Whatever qualities Regan is building into being the experiencing subject of a life. He's not too specific in this paper, but in other places he'll say things like being sentient, so being able to sense, being able to remember, being able to project into the future, even if just a little bit. All these qualities are sufficient for being the experiencing subject of a life. And if something's the experiencing subject of a life, then it has inherent value. And if it has inherent value, then it has rights. So there's no other quality really that all human beings share. If he's going to include sentience as part of experiencing subject of a life, and maybe that's even sufficient. If you're sentient, then things can go better or worse for you. So I think one way you could think of what Regan is trying to do here is he's taking the criteria for moral consideration that utilitarians insist on, and that's something like just mere sentience or not much more than mere sentience, so low-level mental capacities. But instead of saying that allows beings to be equally morally considered, well, he's still saying that's sufficient to such that they deserve to be equally morally considered, but that they deserve rights, and that's the kind of consideration they deserve. Not just that their happiness should go into an equation equally, but that they deserve rights that would protect them from exploitation. We think that of human beings, and since the rights ascription is based on qualities that we all share and many animals share, they also deserve rights. But there's an objection here. An objection is maybe animals have inherent value,